The Field of 68 Media Network presents Red is the New Orange, a Syracuse basketball podcast.
Vince intercepts a pass, breakaway for the freshman guard, he flies and slams! Aerial assault from Judah Mintz.
Looking to go back door to Bell, they get it to a near corner three, knocks it down! Chris Bell, the sharpshooter.
Bringing you everything you need to know out of the 315.
Up top, Williams surges ahead, up with the right hand and in. A pretty up and under move from Benny Williams to beat his man.
Over to Taylor, he skips into the lane, puts up a floater, it drops in.
Let's get it started with your host, Ian Unsworth and Johnny Gadamowitz.
Hey folks, what's going on? Happy Monday. We've got a bracket, so that's fun. Syracuse is not in it, but that should not come as a surprise to any of us. If it did come as a surprise to you, I think you might need to consult your nearest doctor because you might be a little delusional after the Orange wrap up their season down in Charlotte last week, ACC tournament. Get by Florida State day one, and then really just outplayed by SMU in that second round to put any sort of conference tournament run hopes to bed. Ian, I think we got pretty much about what we expected. Nice to get a win, not a needle-moving win, and this disastrous season now we can kind of put in the rearview mirror finally.
Yeah, with Leonard Hamilton on the way out, didn't seem like Florida State had much of a chance to do anything. And yeah, they came out with a weird game plan. FSU switching everything. Syracuse gets it down to Eddie Lampkin in the first half, and he goes nuts. I think he had at least double digits in the first half, finished the game with 14 points. That's kind of the story of the season for him. But JJ pulls the load as usual, 27 points. And Syracuse almost gave up a double-digit lead. I mean, there's no surprise there. You've seen that happen plenty of times, but eventually finished it out. Made a couple free throws, even though they went 12 of 22 from the line. Free throws were made when it mattered. And, Taylor Bowen didn't have his game of the year. Yes, they won. But SMU was pretty disappointing. And the shame is the first half was close.
It was a game, yeah.
Syracuse played, you can't call it three good halves because there was about an 8-minute stretch against Florida State in the second half that was dismal. But if we're doing the math here, you play 80 minutes, I would say about 64 to 65 of those were good competitive basketball with conference opponents they lost to during the regular season.
Right.
So the whole shtick about the team finding its mojo and playing its best basketball, I think certainly holds a little water. But this team didn't have the juice to really achieve this year. Even though we thought it could at the beginning, it was clear by mid-season that even this team's best was not good enough. That's what we saw.
I did find it interesting after the SMU game, and I'm sure plenty of you have seen the clip at this point. In the Red Autry post-game press conference, was sort of asked, hey, what's your message to the fan base moving forward? And completely neglected even getting into that, which I can get to a certain extent, right? Like there's something to be said for being in the moment and doing your reflecting, in the summertime when time has gone by and you can digest things, but you got to read the room a little bit. No, like second year in a row that you've been at the helm where it's been an absolute stinker. And that's a question that was essentially put on a platter for him where all he had to do was come out and take a little bit of accountability. And again, I'm not saying he needed to go on some elaborate, I think 3-minute explainer, but I would have loved to see a little more than, hey, I'm not going to talk about that right now.
He took a lot of accountability in the press conference. He wasn't shying away from any blame, but I think he was so focused on taking it on the chin and owning up to the fact that it was a bad season that this would throw him out of that gear.
Right.
Again, it is a very easy question. It's a softball. All you have to do is say, we've signed these recruits. We have a bright future. We're going to figure it out. Yada, yada, yada. And I mean, also, it's a chance to ask for more support because when Syracuse has fallen on these hard times, a lot of people, regardless of what sphere they're in, have fallen back on this notion that Syracuse doesn't have the support, whether it be money or resources or this, that, and the third, that they do to succeed. And so if you're going to do it, talk about all the bright things that you have coming in, and then say, we want your help as well to make it better, right? Try to start the turnaround now, because you're not, Red Ultra is not talking to anyone for the next 6 months, at least not in a media sense. So this is kind of the lasting taste you have in your mouth of the past 2 years is losses that are blowouts to teams that shouldn't really be blowing you out.
Well, tell you what, Syracuse Athletics put out a little flyover drone video. Not sure if you got a chance to see it, Ian, but of the football facility.
I've seen the pictures at the insides. My goodness.
So, I mean, the money's coming in. You know it's there. It's just about, how do you tangibly turn it into results? Orange wrap up the year 14-19 overall, 7-13 in conference play, and another year without an NCAA tournament appearance. Speaking of said NCAA tournament, as we sit here and record this on Sunday evening, and we'll finish out our player grades as far as the rest of the roster is concerned coming up in a few. But today being Selection Sunday, we figured good opportunity for us to have a little bit of a chat about what the conference is looking like going into the tournament. And obviously everyone talking about, the quote unquote down year and 4 teams making March Madness, North Carolina finding a way somehow, despite being 1-12 in quad 1 games, to sneak in the back door. What I will say is that, look, you look at the SEC, it feels like the whole conference is there. You look at the ACC, it feels like nobody is there. It's one thing to be well represented. It's another thing to go out there and win March Madness tournament games. And the track record of the ACC, look, I mean, they sent an underperforming Clemson squad to the Elite Eight last year, right? Like, it's not like they're underrepresented and they fizzle out in the first weekend. And quite frankly, I don't expect that this year. I mean, look who you've got. Duke is a team that can go to the Final Four and win it all, obviously. Clemson and Louisville. I was a little surprised to see
Louisville got hosed. Louisville got totally hosed. Louisville beat Clemson twice, first and foremost. It beat West Virginia, who was also a bubble team, whooped Indiana, who was also a bubble team, and handled North Carolina. Like, absolutely dismantled them. So, I don't know. I think the committee overall did not really do a good job of representing the conference tournaments in its overall work on this bracket. There were people saying that North Carolina should have been in off the first 4 line after their performance in the tournament, beating Wake Forest. I mean, Louisville beats Clemson. I don't know. And you even take you zoom out a little bit too. Michigan wins the Big Ten tournament, and they're a 5 seed. The team they just beat, Wisconsin, is a 3.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know. And Bubba Cunningham, being the chair of the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee, he is North Carolina's athletic director, is not going to make matters any better for the ACC, because he's going to get a lot of scrutiny about North Carolina being in. Meanwhile, Louisville has to play the number 1 overall seed in the tournament in the round of 32. If they beat a Creighton team that's also really darn good and has probably a top 5 big man in the country.
Well, all I'll say is, look, you want to put to bed the narrative of it being a down year for the conference, go out there and win. Go out there and perform and outperform some of those expectations, because as much as everybody wants to talk about all the SEC teams, if you get to the Elite Eight and there are just as many ACC teams there as there are SEC, then what kind of conversation are we having here? Because isn't that what it's about, the results, right? So that's my 2 cents on that front. We can shift gears now and bring it back kind of Q-centric, but obviously everybody fired up, and you guys know the Field of 68, the place to be as far as their March Madness coverage. Next few weeks are going to be crazy. These next few days, everybody's sitting on the edge of their seat waiting for these games to actually get going. And while you've got that downtime, sitting on your hands, waiting around to watch some hoops, make sure you get up to speed on everything that the Field of 68 is putting out. Sleepers, who's that trendy Cinderella that can maybe make a second weekend appearance, and all sorts of the good stuff that comes with March Madness and the tournament. As far as Cuse goes in, we got to finish up these grades. Eddie Lampkin and JJ Starling, the two players who are remaining that we got to dish out some report cards to. We'll start with Lampkin, then we'll finish up with JJ. Lampkin is an interesting one for me. I think on the whole, he had a really good year. I think he ended up being outside of JJ Starling, who again missed some time with injury, obviously. You can make the case Syracuse's best player this year, right? Donnie Freeman didn't pan out in the way we had hoped because of the injury. Starling kind of, obviously missed time. And then, obviously had the ebbs and flows that came with his season. Lampkin, there were some games where you got duds, but more often than not, it felt like on the whole, he lived up to the back of his baseball card in the sense that, when the news broke that he was transferring, what was the pitch? Right? This is a veteran guy, been around the block, going to be important from a leadership standpoint, and is going to give you a lot of big time minutes in the front court and put up some real production. And he lived up to that. I'll give him a B plus. I don't think a B plus is too much of a reach for him in this case.
I'm giving him a B. Yes, great finish to the season. I mean, he is really the reason why Syracuse trended upwards in the last 5 games or so. Double doubles in 7 of his last 10. Finishes the season just under 10 rebounds per game. But I'm giving him a B, Johnny, because in the non-conference, he really didn't show up when Syracuse needed him to. Only 6 points against Tennessee, 4 against Texas Tech, 9 against Maryland on 10 shots. There were some games where he looked to be invisible, and there were some games where teams played him off the floor. So that is where you look at the Colorado team last year that made the NCAA tournament, won a couple games because Lampkin was hot. And you look at Lampkin at the end of this year and it's like, oh, wow, I can really see those similarities. But it took him so long to get adjusted. And if you're a 5th-year player who's on his 3rd team, you kind of been through the ringer with college basketball. It shouldn't take you as long as, say, a true freshman to figure out your role, especially when you're expected to come in and be one of the guys. So that's where I kind of lose it with Lampkin. And unfortunately, there are ups and downs. And that's why I'm sticking with a steady B, nothing more.
Makes sense. I'm with you. I can get on that wavelength. Next we'll go to JJ Starling here, who, again, mentioned the injury earlier in the season when he missed some time from late November to early January. Outside of that, I thought JJ had a really consistent year, particularly from a scoring standpoint. Was there the occasional game where he didn't get his because teams bottled him up? You think of that Stanford game out west when he was something like, only made a couple field goals that game and finished with single digits. You think more recently the Virginia game, right, to end the regular season. Now, granted, he didn't necessarily need to do a ton because that was a game that Syracuse had pretty comfortably. But outside of that, like, he was good for 14, 15 points every night, if not more. The question becomes, look, you're the face of the team, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Local product, been the guy now. It's his turn to be the guy and sort of, take the bull by the horns. And what did the overall product get you? Another bad year. Now, again, not on him. But you would have hoped that, hey, this is my show now. I'm going to put you guys on my back and carry you. We didn't see as much of that as I would have hoped, but that is not to say he had a bad year whatsoever. I'll slot him in right there with Eddie for a B plus.
Yeah, there are numbers that support the positive aspects of JJ Starling's season. The 18 points per game, the assist to turnover ratio was in the positives. 73 assists to 61 turnovers. Not a great number, but again, this is not a true point guard we're talking about. But on the negative side of things, when you get increased volume, it comes with a lot more responsibility. And there were dips where you would have liked to see improvement. He takes only 6 more threes than he did last year. but he shoots almost 7% worse. He was 27% from behind the arc this year. And there were some games down the stretch of the season where that really showed. Other than that barrage he had against Clemson, I mean, there weren't many games when you looked at JJ from behind the arc and you were like, oh my good, like Johnny, last year we saw JJ Starling catch fire in a couple of these early season games from behind the arc when he was working out that shoulder problem and finding his stroke. And everyone was talking about, oh, he's doing these shooting drills with GMAC, yada, yada, yada. It seemed like he started to find something with his shot. This year, maybe it's because of the defensive pressure and the attention he got, or maybe because he was forced into a lot more late shot clock situation threes. The quality wasn't there. Also shot worse from the free throw line. Syracuse as a team struggled to make free throws all season. And again, a lot of that responsibility falls on the shoulder of your best player because he is going to get that volume. And the entire Syracuse offense at times was Starling attacking the basket and either making a layup or getting fouled. The responsibility of the best player is to carry that load. And those downturns will really hurt your offense because it becomes one-dimensional after a while.
Yes.
All in all, JJ Starling is a good player, really good college player. But is he the best player on a championship team? Probably not. Is he the best player on a winning team? If he is, he needs a much better supporting cast than he's had the past 2 years.
And that's the question. What does it look like going forward for JJ, right? Like, is next year a year where he's the guy again?
I think the sugar will be shared a lot more next year.
Right.
I think that is the hope and probably the expectation, given the high caliber of recruits that are coming in and the guys that, at least right now, you hope to have back, because we have not heard anything about any Syracuse player entering the transfer portal compared to last year where it was, all right, the season's over Wednesday, Thursday. Guys got out of there by Saturday, Sunday.
So we'll see. We'll see. I think, again, we sort of saw this year what a Syracuse team with JJ Starling as their clear-cut guy, what the ceiling of a team like that is. And you can't run it back with the same philosophy. I agree with your point. It's got to be a much better supporting cast, or he's more of a supplementary piece that, again, can still score and still, be outstanding on both ends and be that all-conference caliber player, but just can't shoulder the load entirely himself. So that's where our grades shake up. Again, I can't give anybody an A-, or I can't get into A territory for a team that went 14-9. But that'll do it for our grades. Any closing thoughts here, Ian, before we sign off? This will be it from a Syracuse standpoint. Orange are obviously done playing basketball, at least as far as we know. I don't think any sort of postseason tournament, it won't be calling their name anywhere else outside.
Not the CBI, that's for sure.
Not the CBI, not the NIT. So that's a wrap on what was a really frustrating season, but hopefully, year 2 of a new head coach, new staff, laying the foundation and better days ahead. This has been a lot of fun. Appreciate you hanging out with us all season here on Red is the New Orange. Again, the Field of 68 is the place to be for all things Tournament Central. So make sure you keep it locked to their podcast. If you're lucky enough to be a fan of a school that is indeed going dancing, make sure you go check out that podcast for said school. Chances are there is one on them. So make sure you go give them a follow, a like, a subscribe, what have you. But that'll do it for us. Johnny and Ian for one last time. Signing off. This has been Red is the New Orange. Enjoy the offseason. Have a great summer. And Cuse basketball will be here again.